So let's go to the short-term, one-night stand, sequential relationship types. Okay, who are they? Psychopathic, narcissistic, Machiavellian, and sadistic.
Because birth control is central to their cultural agenda. With fewer women on the pill, more women will become mothers. Some of them will drop out of the workforce and discover fulfillment and happiness as wives, as homemakers. And this is the real crisis that the Washington Post and the other left-wing rags are worried about. The last thing that the elites want to see is a movement of women fully embracing their own womanhood and men fully embracing their manhood.
So conservatives are always going to be really weird on the issues of things like sexual relationships. And we saw, that video going viral, or at least the thumbnail going viral, of Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson talking about sexual boredom. And I actually watched that video today. Don't watch it, but it's not really relevant to the topic, and it's actually a load of nonsense, to be honest, what they're saying.
The amount of sexual boredom in the society is extraordinary. So you have more sexual choice and variety available than literally any time in human history, given free license by the state because there are no intermediate social institutions in which sort of informal mechanisms of disapproval could make themselves felt. And one of the things, it turns out psychologically, that human beings are turned on by is taboo. And so when you get rid of literally every taboo, then people tend to get bored. And then the question is...
Yeah, well, there's no novelty.
Right, exactly. Novelty goes away. And particularly men are driven by sexual novelty. It's something that is very deeply ingrained. And the power of what marriage was supposed to be is it takes this short-term hedonic desire. And it's said, because female virtue still existed, that in order for you to obtain this, you're going to have to sublimate that desire for the building of something greater.
But I did want to talk today about the conservative war, basically against sex without procreation in mind, which, sounds really strange, and it is. And the weirder part of it now is I've always understood that in terms of a religious thing. I was raised Catholic, and of course I knew that because of the Catholic Church's stance on things like contraception, particularly condoms, there were loads of communities around the world that actually wouldn't use them, even when the transmission of STIs, like HIV, were absolutely rife because their religious leaders told them that using this and basically putting any barrier between your body or like God's will and creating life is sinful and stuff. And you still do get that element of it, but now a lot of them talk about it as like it's a morally impure thing. Like Jordan Peterson, as we're going to look at today, he talks about it being just like ethically bad to have casual relationships. Like he is the arbiter of morality, considering all the shit he says about so much stuff and how bad a person this is. It is funny him telling everyone else, yeah, the worst thing you can do in the world is like have like casual sex and casual relationships. But it is a darker thing because it's translating to Republicans are actually trying to basically make sure women have as little access to contraception as possible. Now, of course, you'll notice this discussion is mainly focused on men trying to take away contraception from women, not men trying to take contraception away from other men. That pretty much is not even in the discussion, to be honest, like condoms and stuff. It's mainly all focused on the pill because all of this comes back to controlling women and controlling women's bodies and conservative men fundamentally wanting to trap you in relationships with them and you to serve as their baby machine and maid, as it's very clear Matt Walsh sees women as this. So I want to talk about all of this today. And yeah, follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on my personal Instagram and also my travel Instagram. And check me out on Threads and Blue Sky. And if you want to support the channel, trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible. And benefits include on Patreon, getting access to videos early. And you can also watch them ad-free on Patreon itself. And if you want to, you can also join the patron-only Discord server. With all of that out of the way, let's get into the video. So fear-mongering specifically about the contraceptive pill for women literally has been something that has been going on basically since the pill became widely available. And an article in CBS, and I think it's interesting because when I hear this sentiment echoed today, in a 1966 feature on the pill and morality, the magazine US News and the World Report asked, "Is the pill regarded as a license for promiscuity? Can its availability to all women of childbearing age lead to sexual anarchy? The author, Pearl Buck, took an even more dire doomsday approach to the pill when she warned in a 1968 Reader's Digest article, "Everyone knows what the pill is. It is a small object, yet its potential effect upon our society, many may even be more devastating than a nuclear bomb." And this is something I actually heard like Matt Walsh describe today, so it's clear whoever this woman is, he's been reading this woman and it mirrors his own views. The funny thing is, obviously, we know the 1960s, particularly in America, as like the sexual revolution. But what is also funny is you can only really argue against the pill and a woman having the ability to choose if she wants to take it or not if you come at it from, like patriarchy, the status quo, and keeping women in their place we've put them in. That is all like a really, really good thing. And when half the population are women, it's pretty likely they're not going to see it that way and not see the benefits of being able to engage in relationships without the massive risk of having someone else's child, which will then tie you to them basically for the rest of your life, potentially. Now, obviously, a lot of what these conservatives do is they take the well-documented side effects of the pill and they use that against everyone advocating for it. It's like, don't put this poison into your body. And why they do that is because, it is a well-known side effect. Like, I know women in my own life and they spoke about it, how the pill does have pretty terrible side effects on things like mood and everything, and they've actually chosen not to take it. I've known people in my circle who have said they don't take it anymore because the side effects are so terrible, right? So it's up to them to have contraception a different way, whether that be, the man taking the initiative, being more careful, wearing a condom, or other forms of contraception women can use. But at the same time, like with everything, it's a choice, and for lots of women, they use it for medical reasons. It's not all about like casual hookups with some random bloke and stuff. But it's funny to me, conservatives who position themselves as the champions of freedom are so against things like contraception specifically for women. And also, you're not going to hear this outright, but I want everyone to keep this in mind. Obviously, the people you're going to see today are white people, white North Americans, and I think I have a British woman. And they're worried mainly about white people not having enough children because, they're terrified of the great replacement. Now, Elon Musk also is someone who advocates against contraception because he has some sort of breeding kink. And I might make a whole video on this. I've been actually pretty horrified as I've made my way through the Dune books. I'm currently on the God Emperor one. It's pretty, insane to see that Elon Musk clearly models a lot of his politics on these books, especially the breeding programs. I wouldn't be surprised if Elon Musk actually sees himself as God Emperor Leto II. I might delve into that in a whole video because it is very disgusting. Because I know Elon Musk is obsessed with science fiction. But let's get into, the more serious issues a bit more. So let's talk about conservative influencers in America. I just want to talk about Jordan Peterson, who's just so strange on this. And he doesn't come at it from the angle of, explicitly that it's something religious. It's more about just hedonism is just morally bad, according to him. So let's listen to some of his arguments against just casual relationships and, casual sex.
I don't think there's any such thing as a casual sexual relationship. I don't believe that. I've never seen any evidence that that's the case. I think that people rationalize that constantly because they want to believe, that short-term hedonistic gratification is ethically acceptable. And I don't think it is. I think that it trains you to treat yourself and other people as instrumental objects of short-term pleasure, obviously. Is that how you want to train yourself? You're going to have a long-term relationship at some point? How are you going to train yourself for that? Okay, so having said that, and then, how carefully should we conduct ourselves in sexual matters? I would say, well, as carefully as you conduct yourself in any matter of importance. And that stretches all the way up to the top, whatever the top is. You're going to treat the other person as if they're a divine locus of consciousness or a disposable entity. Well, those are the borders. I don't think there is such a thing as casual sex. I think that's indistinguishable from masturbation. which I also don't regard as a particularly heroic act. And I think people have that sense, and I don't think that that's culturally instantiated, because in some sense we've done everything we can to eradicate every last vestige of sexual shame. I wanted to have a serious conversation about sexual impropriety on campuses, for example. The first thing we'd focus on is alcohol, but we don't want to have a serious conversation about that because, well, we don't want to have chaperoned parties like there were in the 1950s. It's like, well, having some older people around to keep the drunken orgy under control actually turns out not to be such a bad idea.
I love in that how Jordan Peterson is just such a nerd that he talks about, we should chaperone gatherings of young people taking alcohol because, that's actually a good thing to police people morally. And I do find it funny all the time, especially Jordan Peterson, how much they demonize what they perceive to be like Islamists and stuff. And it's like, you agree with all of them on everything, right? Like religious conservatives, you just all agree with each other. If you realize that, it'd probably be really dangerous for the rest of us because you'd all unite and subject us all to this conservative religious, whatever he likes to call it, morality. But yeah, that is like interesting how he doesn't think, it's ethically right to have casual sexual relationships. And the only purpose of them, the only purpose of having a sexual relationship with anyone before, I don't know, getting into like a serious relationship or getting like engaged and stuff is just for hedonistic pleasure. Now, of course, hookup culture is a thing. And yeah, I don't care about that at all. I don't think most modern people really care about it at all. There is a lot to be said about, relationships in the social media age, dating apps and all that stuff, and I get it. If there are downsides, the plus sides are you want to know if you're sexually compatible with someone before you make the commitment or a longer term commitment, right? It's obviously a good way to realize if you're a woman, because that's what we're talking about here from this point of view today. Intimacy does say a lot about someone in terms of if they're selfish, how they actually act in that moment. Do they care about the gratification of both of you, or is it all about them? And although people like Jordan Peterson, if you just see sex as an act to make children, you probably don't care about that part because why would you? But for most modern people, that's important to a relationship. And it's something that can obviously cause issues in the future. So if you experience it early on, you can thankfully factor that into your judgment of the overall relationship. And also I've seen so many posts on the relationships Reddit of people who get married very young from religious backgrounds, whether that be arranged marriages in South Asian communities or what happens a lot in white Christian evangelical communities in the US, people getting married at 20 years old and then realizing, this sex life is just not satisfying to me and I got to be with this person until I die. That's the benefit of the sexual revolution, that all genders can get a glimpse quickly into what the dynamic will be like, and they can make a better judgment of if they could work through that or if they're compatible at all. And of course, that goes without saying, everyone has their own tastes. People have things like kinks that are important to them as well and important to their experience of this stuff. And you just might not be compatible on that level. And I know to a lot of Christian and religious types, that's not important, but to most more modern people, that is important. And especially how we're generally taught about sex in a patriarchal system is of course important to women to see if a man will prioritize her as well, because as men, we're not really taught much about that, right? You kind of have to discover it on your own. And I remember when I was taking sex education in school, we barely learned anything about women. And it's not like I grew up in a really repressed time or anything like that, right? So I'd hate to think about how these men, especially if you listen to Jordan Peterson or Matt Walsh, what you would be like. So yeah, I think the casual hookup culture has the plus side of people being able to work this out. So yeah, it's a good thing. I'm not a religious conservative. I'm not someone who grew up repressed. I don't have loads of judgments on these things like people like Jordan Peterson. I just find this demonizing of it from his perspective in terms of him saying it's not fulfilling or helpful to human life really bizarre. But we have the darker side, of course, when we have people like fascists like Matt Walsh talking about this as well. Now, he has a couple videos on this. He has been against contraception for a long, long time because he believes if, you can't handle the responsibility of having a child from this act, then just abstain. And I don't even think I got taught that in Catholic secondary school because they just appreciated the realities of just like modern life. People are just going to have sex anyway, so you better give them contraception, especially like older teenagers, and they're not really thinking about the child side. But yeah, I have this video here, and I think it reveals a lot.
Because birth control is central to their cultural agenda. With fewer women on the pill, more women will become mothers. Some of them will drop out of the workforce and discover fulfillment and happiness as wives, as homemakers. And this is the real crisis that the Washington Post and the other left-wing rags are worried about. The last thing that the elites want to see is a movement of women fully embracing their own womanhood and men fully embracing their manhood. A move back towards the family, away from materialism, away from self-preoccupation, towards marriage, towards parenthood. That's what they don't want to see. These people have been waging a war on the family for decades, and the birth control pill was their nuclear bomb. The family is the greatest threat to them. And a society full of families, of intact, happy families with attentive mothers and strong fathers, that is a society that has rendered these people basically powerless. That is their fear. And they fear it like they fear nothing else.
So yeah, in Matt Walsh's ideal future, it'd basically be like Germany in the 1930s, right? Women would know their role because they're happier as mothers, right? And men would be manly and they just have like infinite numbers of children. Now, obviously, he said the nuclear bomb quote there as well, because they see everything to do with the pill and sexual liberation as an attack on the family. But also, if we're going to make this argument, right, that society is better with happy families, why is the contraceptive pill not a good thing to that degree, right? Because if you're not on contraception, and we accept that more casual relationships are more common, if you just get pregnant with a random person, and then, you know, in Matt Walsh's framing, he wants people to be happy wives and mothers or whatever, right? Are you going to be more happy if you can control who you have children with? Or you might end up with some random person and have their child. Will you be a happy wife and mother then? Of course you won't, and that doesn't lead to happy families. So controlling who you can have a child with is way more beneficial, even to the aim he's talking about. But again, he doesn't want women's agency. He doesn't want women to decide if they want to become wives and mothers. He thinks all women should just be baby machines, and that is their worth to society. Because this guy is a fascist. Not that he needs to tell us that anymore. But yeah, that argument is ridiculous. And you can see conservatives don't care about freedom. Any conservatives. They just want to control you. They want to control women. And they want to do this for what they feel like is men's benefit. Because Matt Walsh is a guy who has like 6 children, probably isn't very active in their lives, just sits around the Daily Wire studios making terrible videos while his wife does everything. And like I've always shown you that clip, there's a clip of them all bragging about how they do no housework. Doesn't seem like a very equal relationship, and I bet most people in a relationship like that, yeah, they probably have some issues if you're not splitting the housework. And I wouldn't call people trapped in these marriages and trapped with children people who'd be like particularly happy. But again, Matt Walsh knows what's best for you, just knock you up. And also what they want to do is end no-fault divorce. So if you actually have someone's child, you think they're the one, and they turn out to be a monster, oh, you can't actually leave. So you're trapped with them forever, with the legal binding and having a child as well. People like Matt Walsh just want to live in The Handmaid's Tale. So I saw this other video on the Heritage Foundation page, and this one was funny. They're saying it's like pro-feminist to be against the pill, but also coated in some very weird conservative language. So listen to this.
I hear from a great many young women who were put on the pill at the age of 14 and came off it, so maybe 10 years later, and realised they'd done a complete personality flip, and actually they... You know, I was, you know, one said, and I quote, I thought I was bipolar. But then it turned out actually it was just this psychoactive substance that I'd been, what were they doing to me? And this is all, and this was all to the purpose of rendering a woman receptive to what is, for the most part, loveless and sometimes extremely degrading sexual access. And I struggle to see in what way that's in women's interests. And given the great many other things that, to my eye, are downstream of the entry into that paradigm, it seems to me that a good place to start would be a feminist movement against the pill, and for rewilding sex, returning the danger to sex, returning the intimacy, and really the consequentiality to sex. And a great deal follows from an intentional reconnection of women's opting intentionally to reconnect with the fullness of our embodied nature.
So basically, like maybe like a more woke version of just saying what Matt Walsh was saying there, basically saying, yeah, you shouldn't have sex unless you want to procreate, and it would actually be a feminist position to get rid of the pill, because with the pill, sex has become meaningless and often like really, really degrading for women. So it's not like a pro-women position to be pro the pill, which allows you to have more casual relationships at like a minimum, but also, like I said, you can be on the pill and be in like a long-term relationship and just don't want to get pregnant. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, how does that diminish the sexual experience? And also, humans have been having casual sexual relationships for as long as humans existed. Like, these people often talk about like the greatness of Sparta, of ancient Athens, or ancient Rome, and all these other societies before Christianity, right? They all love them, especially that Roman Empire one. Like, people like Matt Walsh love the Roman Empire. Like, what do you think these people did? I think humans have done throughout all of human history. Did they not engage in casual sex because they didn't have a contraceptive pill? Is that something that really, really happened? No, of course it didn't. Someone who grew up in the Christian faith and stuff like that, I understand that religions like Christianity have heavily demonized this stuff, and pretty much like lots of the stuff I'm showing you today is just a result of the Christian faith. But at the same time, they're acting like the actual natural order of being a human is only having sex for the purpose of procreation, which, you know, is just not true. Now, just on this religious note as well, I was just reading some rando, like, American, like, Catholic Christian blog. I don't know who this person is, but I just wanted to end it with this. So, guy called Christopher West. So the question of contraception is what caused me to leave the Catholic Church in the 1980s, and as I continue to wrestle with it, it's what brought me back in the 90s. As more and more people like me search for the source of today's societal chaos and gender confusion, they're rediscovering the sexual math that all Christian churches understood until rather recently. When we fail to reverence the fact that genitals are meant to generate, society itself degenerates. Few realize today that until 1930, all Christian leaders condemned contraception. That year, the Anglican bishops were first to succumb to the external pressures and reluctantly change their position. In the years that followed, denomination after denomination shifted from condemnation of contraception to acceptance to advocation. With the dawn of the pill in the 1960s, global pressure was now being put on the Catholic Church. Pope Paul VI shocked the world in 1968 when he issued Of Human Life, reaffirming traditional Christian teaching against contraception, including the pill. He was scorned globally, but he understood well that a contracepting world would become a world of rampant immorality, a world where women and childbearing are degraded, a world in which governments trample on the rights of the family, and a world in which human beings believe they can manipulate their bodies at will. Welcome to the new world order. So I think that from a very conservative Catholic American just sums up like how they view this stuff. They view it as all linked together, as they always have with the sexual revolution. Like, once you just give them an inch with maybe a contraceptive pill, they're just going to destroy everything. So people being transgender or gay, that is also linked to the contraceptive pill, all that stuff. But of course, all these people think religion is the basis of our morality, despite the fact that like throughout human history, all these religions have been used to justify terrible things, and some of the most immoral people in our current society, just think of all these terrible world leaders, think of Netanyahu, think of President Putin, think of someone like Joe Biden, all claim to be people of like the Christian faith, but have no problem with killing hundreds of thousands of people. And often they do it for this faith as well, as we see in places like Israel. It's very clear, even if they're coming at it from a medical angle, which they skew the facts, it's all about the religious angle. And it's all about the Catholic version of family or the fascist Christian version of family, where women don't have autonomy, women don't have choices, women have to just have sex to procreate because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about women's pleasure or anything like that. It's all about just a man has sex with you to have his offspring. You will raise it and he won't actually really help with that. And you'll be trapped in that marriage to the end of time. Like many generations that came before us, when our society was even more patriarchal. And that's what they hate. They just hate equality, and they just hate gender equality. And thankfully, in many countries like the UK, We're seeing that being pushed back a lot because we did get a lot of the more like Christian MPs actually voted out recently who did believe stuff like this about things like contraception. But with America, it's of course a real danger because although most Americans, even most Republicans, agree with contraception, when you have a small group like, you know, people in the Heritage Foundation or just generally rich evangelicals who donate a lot to the Republican Party, they can get stuff like this passed. Because the capitalist system has subverted democracy, which allows just a few rich people to get their religious agenda passed and try and turn back the clock on women's rights. So that is another fear with things like Project 2025 and just Republican and conservative governments around the world. But that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.